The air in my new office smelled of expensive leather and something faint, like lavender, the exact scent my wife, Elena, wore every single day. I sat in my ergonomic chair, staring at the polished mahogany desk, feeling a strange mix of pride and anxiety. At 34, landing this senior project manager role at a top-tier architectural firm felt like the big break our family had been waiting for. My wife, Elena, had been my biggest cheerleader, constantly reminding me that our 2-year-old son, Leo, deserved a father who was building a legacy, not just clocking hours. Mr. Thorne, welcome aboard, my boss, Mr. Sterling, had said earlier that morning with a firm handshake. He was a man of few words, sharp-suited and intimidatingly composed. He had excused himself for a meeting, leaving me to settle into the office. I leaned back, taking a moment to look around the room. It was minimalist, modern, and intimidatingly clean. That was when my eyes drifted to the corner of the desk. There was a silver, brushed metal frame, slightly tucked behind a stack of quarterly reports. I didn't mean to look, it was just a reflex, the kind of idle observation you make when you're nervous in a new space. My breath hitched. My heart didn't just skip a beat, it felt like it stopped, plunging into my stomach. It was a photo of Elena. But it wasn't just a photo. It was the picture I had taken of her on our 5th anniversary, 3 years ago, at a small bistro in the city. She was laughing, her hand tucked behind her ear, wearing that delicate gold necklace I had bought her, the one she told me she lost during our move last year. She looked radiant, youthful, and entirely unaware that her image was sitting on the desk of a man I had only just met. I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. My hands, resting on the mahogany, suddenly felt shaky. Why would Mr. Sterling have a private photo of my wife? A wave of nausea washed over me. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I hovered over the frame, debating whether to pick it up or push it away. Is this a dream? I wondered, my mind racing through impossibilities. Did he know her? Did they work together before? Before I could touch the silver edge, the door handle clicked. I snapped my hand back, spinning around in my chair just as Mr. Sterling walked back into the room. He caught me in the act, not of touching the frame, but of staring at it with an expression I couldn't quite mask. He glanced at the desk, his eyes narrowing just a fraction, and then back at me. The silence in the room suddenly felt heavy, suffocating. Is everything to your liking, Arthur? He asked, his voice low and devoid of its earlier warmth. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. Everything is perfect, sir. Just getting settled. But as he walked toward his own desk, I noticed him slide the frame ever so slightly further behind the report stack. My blood ran cold. The rest of the day was a blur of blurred faces and hushed introductions. I went through the motions, shaking hands, memorizing names, and nodding at project timelines, but my mind was trapped behind that stack of reports on Mr. Sterling's desk. Every time I looked over, I felt the phantom weight of that photograph burning a hole through the wood. When I finally pulled into the driveway that evening, the house looked smaller, somehow less inviting than it had that morning. Inside, the sound of cartoons was playing, and I could hear Elena humming in the kitchen, a sound that usually grounded me. Today, it sounded dissonant. "How was your first day, love?" she asked, turning to greet me with a smile. She wiped her hands on her apron and kissed my cheek. I leaned into her, searching for something, a change in her expression, a flicker of guilt, the scent of a lie. She looked exactly the same, soft, warm, and familiar. "It was intense," I said, my voice sounding strained to my own ears. "A lot of new faces. Mr. Sterling seems like a very demanding man." I watched her reaction closely. At the mention of his name, she didn't blink, didn't stiffen. She just stirred the pasta sauce, her movements fluid and unhurried. "Well, you always said you wanted to work for the best, Arthur. Just give it time." I spent the next week in a state of quiet surveillance. I started noticing things I had previously ignored. The late nights she'd been working at her boutique design firm, the sudden interest in new perfume, the way she would sometimes smile at her phone, then quickly lock it when I entered the room. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the stress of the new job was manifesting as irrational jealousy. But then came the bill. I was checking our shared credit card statement online when I saw it, a recurring charge for a private club in the city, the Azure Lounge. It was near the office district. I remembered Mr. Sterling mentioning that he frequented the area for business dinners. That Friday, I told Elena I had to stay late for a client presentation. Instead, I parked my car 2 blocks away from the office building and waited. The city lights flickered to life, painting the streets in hues of neon blue and harsh white. At 7:30 p.m., I saw it. Mr. Sterling's sleek, black sedan pulled up to the curb. Elena stepped out of the lobby, but she wasn't wearing her usual work attire. She was in a dress I didn't recognize, a deep, vibrant red, and she was laughing, that same effortless laugh I had seen in the photograph. She walked toward the car, and Mr. Sterling stepped out, opening the door for her with a level of familiarity that made my lungs ache. He leaned in, and for a fleeting moment, he kissed her cheek, not as a colleague, but as a man who owned the space she occupied. I sat in the dark of my car, the steering wheel digging into my palms until my knuckles turned white. I didn't scream. I didn't run out. I just sat, watching my life, the one I had built with blood and sweat, begin to dismantle itself in the dim glow of a street lamp. I didn't follow them. I knew exactly where they were going, and the knowledge felt like lead in my veins. I drove home in a daze, the city lights blurring into long, painful streaks of color. When I walked into the house, Leo was already asleep in his crib, his breathing soft and rhythmic, a stark, heartbreaking contrast to the chaos tearing through my chest. I sat in the dark living room, staring at the front door for hours. When the lock finally clicked at 11 p.m., I didn't turn on the lights. I heard her heels clicking softly against the hardwood, followed by the sound of her humming that same melody. "Arthur? Are you still up?" she asked, her voice calm, composed. I stood up, the shadow of my figure finally catching her attention. She gasped, dropping her bag. "You scared me. Why are you sitting in the dark? Where were you, Elena?" I asked. My voice was steady, not because I was calm, but because I had reached a level of numbness where anger couldn't breathe. She paused, her hand lingering on the light switch. "I told you, there was a late-night planning meeting for the firm. We have that new contract, Arthur, you know how busy I've been." "The Azure Lounge," I said, the words heavy and cold. Was the meeting at the Azure Lounge? With Mr. Sterling? The silence that followed was deafening. The air in the room seemed to vanish. I saw her shoulders slump, the mask of the doting wife slipping just enough to reveal the terrified, cornered person underneath. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. "Arthur, it's not what you think," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Then tell me what it is." I stepped forward, into the sliver of moonlight filtering through the window. "Tell me why my boss has a photo of you on his desk. Tell me why you're wearing a dress I've never seen, getting into a car with a man who signs my paychecks." She started to cry then, but it wasn't the kind of crying that invited comfort. It was the frantic, selfish sobbing of someone who had been caught. "I needed the promotion, Arthur. You weren't earning enough, the baby's medical bills, the house payments. He offered to help my firm, to guarantee my success. He was just a mentor. A mentor doesn't keep a shrine of you on his desk, Elena." I erupted, the control finally snapping. I didn't yell, but the sheer force of my words made her recoil. "You didn't just betray our marriage, you traded our dignity for a faster climb. You let him parade you around while I was busy trying to earn an honest living to support the family you were already looking past." I didn't stay to hear the rest of the excuses. I went to the guest room and locked the door, leaving her alone in the hallway. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, thinking not of revenge, but of the wreckage. Tomorrow, I had to walk back into that office, and I had to face the man who thought he had bought my world. The next morning, I walked into the office with a clarity that surprised me. I didn't feel like a victim anymore, I felt like a man cleaning up a mess. I went straight to Mr. Sterling's office. He was sitting there, nursing a coffee, his expression one of arrogant complacency. He didn't even look up as I entered. "I need to speak with you," I said, my voice steady. "Make it quick, Arthur." "We have a busy day ahead," he replied, gesturing toward a seat. I didn't sit. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila envelope. I laid it on his desk, right on top of the stack of reports. He frowned, finally looking up. "What is this?" "A resignation letter," I said. "And the evidence of your consulting fees paid to my wife's firm, the ones that clearly violate company ethics and your own employment contract regarding conflict of interest." His face paled, then flushed a deep, ugly crimson. He opened the envelope, his eyes scanning the documents. He knew I had copies. He knew that in this industry, reputation was everything. He had toyed with my life, thinking I was too desperate for this paycheck to notice, but he had underestimated my resolve. "You won't get away with this," he hissed. "I don't need to get away with anything," I replied calmly. "I'm just leaving. You, on the other hand, have to explain to the board why you were financing a side business with company assets just to keep a mistress on the payroll. I think they'll be very interested in the photos I've included, too." I walked out of that office and didn't look back. I didn't wait for his reaction. I didn't care about his apology or his threats. When I got home, Elena was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red and swollen. I didn't need to say much. She saw the look on my face, the finality in my posture, and she knew it was over. We didn't shout. We didn't fight. The betrayal had already done all the talking. We began the painful, quiet process of untangling our lives, prioritizing Leo's stability above all else. It's been 6 months now. I'm working at a smaller firm, a place where people value honesty over shortcuts. It's not as prestigious, and the salary is modest, but when I look in the mirror, I recognize the man staring back. I lost a version of my life, but I saved my integrity. ###reflection. I've learned that the hardest part of betrayal isn't the discovery, it's the realization that you were living with a stranger. It hurts, and the scars remain, but they are reminders that I am strong enough to walk away from a life built on shadows. I chose the truth, even when it cost me everything I thought I wanted. Would you have held your ground the way I did, or would the fear of losing it all have kept you silent? Sometimes, the price of peace is letting go of the life you thought you needed. If my story moved you or gave you strength, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. Thank you for listening.